r/AskReddit. Historians of Reddit. What is the biggest docu moment in history? A pirate known as Jean Lafitte had a bounty of $500 put on him by governor, so he put a $5,000 bounty on the governor. No you. I'm a French quarter tour guide. I tell this story every day. Napoleon invited his brother-in-law to speak with him before his coronation as emperor to remind the brother-in-law that he objected to Napoleon marrying Josephine because Napoleon would amount to nothing. Now this is the kind of petty docu I can get behind. So when France exiles Napoleon Bonaparte, the first time, they didn't think to change out military personnel, so he basically rolls up to the first French outpost he gets to, says sup and begins reassembling an army. By the time he gets to Paris, he's got enough forces that France is like, well, welcome back. He supposedly said to the first soldiers he encountered, any of you who dare oppose the emperor, fire. The soldiers cheered and joined him. This reminds me of the execution of Michael Nee. Soldiers, when I give the command to fire, fire straight at my heart. Wait for the order. It will be my last to you. I protest against my condemnation. I have fought 100 battles for France, and not one against her. Soldiers, fire. The soldiers fired and killed him. That's metal as duck. You can't fire me. I quit. In AD 37, the new Roman Emperor Gaius, better known by the nickname Caligula, built a bridge across the sea. It stretched 3 miles across the deep blue waters of the Bay of Naples at ancient Rome's most fashionable seaside resort of Baiae. But Caligula's was no ordinary bridge. It was a temporary, floating structure built on wooden pontoons, a costly and impressive featuring of engineering. It served a single purpose before being dismantled. On a day of boiling heat watched by crowds of spectators, Caligula rode across the bridge. His armor glinted in the sunlight, for the 24-year-old emperor had dressed himself in the golden breastplate of the legendary Greek hero Alexander the Great. On the following day Caligula made the journey in reverse, this time riding in a chariot, followed by soldiers of his personal guard. It was a pointless piece of showmanship, lost on the majority of the crowd, several of whom fell drunkenly to their deaths in the sea after 2 days partying. One historian claimed Caligula pulled the stunt to disprove a prophecy that he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. Threatening to make his horse a consul was also in the same vein. It wasn't a serious consideration born out of madness but rather an insult to the Senate. Either my horse can do a better job than any of you or I can make my horse consul and you can't do anything about it. In the 1970s, the small town of Vulcan, West Virginia asked for state funding to replace a bridge into town. The state legislature refused to grant Vulcan the funding they needed. Instead, the town appealed to the Soviet Union for aid. After hearing about the request, the state legislature immediately granted over $1 million for the town to build a new bridge. If a small town in WV asking for Soviet funding in the middle of the Cold War isn't a big middle finger to the state government, then I don't know what is. The funny part is that 2 Soviet representatives at the US Embassy actually came over to look at the broken bridge and seriously considered funding the rebuilding to piss off the Americans. Imagine the propaganda the Soviets could have pushed from that. Honestly, smart move by the town. Win for them no matter who funds it. I would say the moment that Rollo swore allegiance to the French king, the bishops present suggested that Rollo kiss the king's foot as a sign of submission. It was probably an idea intended to humiliate Rollo, and was not taken very well. After some discussion, it was agreed that one of Rollo's men would do it. However, the person chosen lifted the king's foot, and, without bending down, brought it up to his mouth. Not surprisingly, the king fell over, amid general laughter in the court. Following this amusing scene, the king and his men swore to honor the concession to Rollo. Durham World Heritages at .com link. That's great. Just ducking flip the king over instead. That whole image just made me laugh. That's ballsy. This requires some background. The Spartans were famously blunt. They were trained to get to the point when speaking, instead of using artsy and beautiful language that would have been common at the time, by being bitten on the thumb if they became long-winded. Now to the meat. Philip II of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, sent the Spartans a letter saying, "Would you like me to enter your land as friend or foe?" The Spartans responded with one word, "Neither." Philip was irate. He then sent another long-winded message, "If once I enter into your territories, I will destroy ye all, never to rise again." The Spartans then sent back one word, "If." It was like putting your head in a lion's mouth, and I love it. That's where the meaning of laconic comes from. British prisoner of war in Nazi Germany stitches a quilt. The Nazis put it out for show. Hidden in Morse code stitched in were the words "Duck Hitler" and "God Save the Queen." Telegraph Co UK link. Edit "God Save the King." I think I just had the Queen song stuck in my head. On the crowning of King Henry VII, he backdated his own reign to before the date of the Battle of Bosworth, meaning anyone who was loyal to him now but had shown any sign of opposition at Bosworth was now a traitor and an enemy to the realm. Justice served. This is already one of my favorite threads in Reddit history. Galvarino, Chilean warrior who had both his hands cut off by the conquistadors for raising arms against the Spanish. Instead of letting himself serve as a message of helplessness in the face of the invaders, the crazy bastard strapped swords to his stumps and went on the warpath. May I add that when he got defeated again, the Spanish were impressed and offered him to surrender, but he spit in the commander's face, so they literally fed him to their dogs. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Edit. Damn guys, thanks so much. Literally made my karma score 9 times as big. According to that link, that is one theory, but there are other theories as to how he died. All we know for sure is that once he got defeated the second time, he died. This is more petty, but when Taft bragged to his friends via telegram about scaling a mountain on horseback, that it was a few thousand feet, clear weather, all in all not too difficult, his friend replied, "How is horse?" Taft was a chunky boy. It makes me so very happy to know that ball busting between friends is an age-old tradition. Even better that it involved a president. When Germanic tribes invaded Britain after the Romans left, they named the native Celts Welsc, meaning foreigner, even though they themselves were the foreigners. That later became the word Welsh, which the English promptly adopted for phrases like Welch on a bet, TL, DR. All of history has been one giant etymological middle finger to the Welsh. Yeah, but the Welsh language is itself a middle finger to English speakers. More like the English orthography used for Welsh is a middle finger to the Welsh people. The Irish language as written has similar issues as well. A bunch of phonemes and sounds that don't exist in English are instead written using weird letter combos and really subtle grammar tricks. I sometimes think it was a deliberate tactic to make sure nobody could bloody read either Welsh or Irish. The reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks is the best response to a demand for surrender ever. In response to requests by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to desist attacks and submit Zaporozhian Cossacks to the Turkish Sultan, "O Sultan, Turkish devil and damned devil's kith and kin, secretary to Lucifer himself, what the devil kind of knight are thou, that canst not slay a hedgehog with your naked ass? The devil shits, and your army eats. Thou shalt not, thou son of a horse, make subjects of Christian sons. We have no fear of your army. By land and by sea we will battle with thee. Duck thy mother, thou Babylonian scullion, Macedonian wheelwright, brewer of Jerusalem, goat ducker of Alexandria, swineherd of Greater and Lesser Egypt, pig of Armenia, Podolian thief, Catamite of Tartary, hangman of Commandments, and fool of all the world and underworld, an idiot before God, grandson of the serpent, and the crick in our dong, pig's snout, mer's ass, slaughterhouse cur, unchristened brow, screw thine own mother." So the Zaporozhians declare, "You lowlife, you won't even be herding pigs for the Christians." Now we'll conclude, for we don't know the date and don't own a calendar. The moon's in the sky, the year with the Lord. The day's the same over here as it is over there. For this kiss our ass. Kashovai Ottoman Ivan Serko. With the whole Zaporozhian host. Edit. 7 years and my first gold. Neat. There's a painting of this moment with all the Cossacks laughing as they compose the letter. I'll never get tired of that painting. You can hear them just looking at it. Also, Ilya Repin's an amazing painter in general, and the rest of his stuff's always worth a look. Not the biggest, probably, but the first that came to mind. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's response to the Nazi demand that Bastogne surrender. Nuts. Nuts. The general's word echo clear. Nuts. The Nazis shall hear. At this point I should probably just expect this in anything history related, shouldn't I? The Second Defenestration of Prague. The Holy Roman Emperor and King of Bohemia sends representatives to the Protestant city of Prague telling them to convert to Catholicism. The representatives get thrown out a window and allegedly landed in a pile of manure. This was the first instance of a bounced check. No, edit. Thanks Reddit. Or, rather DQG Varm. The construction and use of the Warwolf. Supposedly the largest trebuchet ever built. When it was disassembled it would fill up 30 wagons. So anyways, King Edward I built this to siege a Scottish castle, but before it was even built the Scottish people tried to surrender. To which Edward responded with a prompt no. In actuality he responded with, you do not deserve any grace, but must surrender to my will. In other words, I built this trebuchet over 40 days and I am most definitely going to use it, and proceeded to use the trebuchet anyways. 30 wagons to transport it and 40 days to assemble it, and they expected him to just pack it up when they surrendered. AWW hell no, Big Ed gonna chuck some rocks. I went to all the trouble to build this dank trebuchet and now you bet your ass I'ma test it. NM Wikipedia org link. Olga of Kiev. When her husband died, the country that killed him assumed they'd just take over and force her into marriage. She straight up killed the dignitaries that were sent to tell her she had to marry, multiple times, in the most intense way possible. She then traveled to where her husband had been killed and basically burned the place to the ground, again, in the most hardcore, amazing way. They made her a freaking son. Worth a read on Wikipedia. Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of them. 1 of them with a bomb and another with a rifle. If you don't stop sending killers, I'll send a very fast working one to Moscow and I certainly won't have to send another. Tito to Joseph Stalin. If someone made a black comedy TV series about the Eastern Bloc, this would be one of the highlights. Have you seen The Death of Stalin? So ducking good I watched it 2 nights in a row. Ferruccio Lamborghini was a rich man owning his company that built tractors. He talked to Ferrari about the imperfections of his car and how to improve them, and they basically laughed at a young tractor mechanic trying to tell them about sport cars. So he decided to start making luxury sport cars to compete with Ferrari, and thus, the rivalry was born. So I'd say the middle finger of this guy to Ferrari was pretty noticeable. Every time I read this story I wish Lamborghini had its own F1 team to beat Ferrari, since that was Enzo's true pride and joy. Lamborghini didn't want to race though. That's his original complaint to Ferrari in the first place. The car was just too hard for road use and its clutch looked like a race car. So he started a pretty successful sports car brand for the road, not for the track. French surrender in World War II. Hitler dictates that the French capitulation take place at Compiègne, a forest north of Paris. This is the same spot where 22 years earlier the Germans had signed the armistice ending World War I. Hitler intends to disgrace the French and avenge the German defeat. To further deepen the humiliation, he orders that the signing ceremony take place in the same railroad car that hosted the earlier surrender. The armistice is signed on the 22nd of June. Under its terms, 2/3 of France is to be occupied by the Germans. The French army is to be disbanded. In addition, France must bear the cost of the German invasion. I was hoping someone would post this. Hitler later destroyed the railroad carriage when things started going south for the Axis. Because how hilariously shitty would it have been to make them sign the next treaty in the same ducking railroad car? They'd probably keep it going. And over here, you can see the loser box. This railroad car is kept in storage until a nation gets stomped in warfare, at which point it is prepared for the signing of treaties, a centuries-long tradition. The you lose caboose. The miscarriage. Julius Caesar's death. At least he died surrounded by friends. The first recorded incident of a group project where most of the group doesn't do the ducking work. I love it because there are several levels. There were about 40 conspirators. Caesar received 23 stab wounds. So right off the bat, and not even accounting for people managing to stab him multiple times, about half the folks involved did jack shit. But then later his body was examined, and the doctor concluded that only one of those was properly fatal on its own. Even of the people that actually did any work at all, just one got it right and didn't half-ass things. That's a group project. Not the biggest, but definitely one to note. In 1966, Charles de Gaulle ordered all US troops out of France, as he said the country was leaving NATO. LBJ's first words were to his Secretary of State, Dean Rusk. Ask him about the cemeteries, Dean. When Dean Rusk mentioned whether or not the 60,000 plus US soldiers buried in France were to be removed, de Gaulle simply stood up and left the room, embarrassed. The Battle of Alicia. Julius Caesar's attacking some Gauls in modern day France, and they go hide in a castle on top of a hill. Caesar's army isn't big enough to take them all at once, and the Gauls have reinforcements coming, so a siege is impossible. So Caesar just builds a bigger castle around the one he's attacking. He literally just built 2 walls back to back and a ring around the castle. The first Gaul army was already too small to defeat Caesar, and his fortifications only gave him a greater advantage. The reinforcements were also unable to defeat Caesar's army now that he was behind several layers of spike pits and both earthen and wooden walls. Plus the Gauls inside had no way to communicate with the reinforcements outside, so they couldn't coordinate attacks. Both Gallic armies were defeated as they attacked Caesar's newly built fortifications, and Caesar emerged victorious. It's probably my favorite battle of all time. Operation Paul Bunyan. Here's the TLDR if you don't want to read the Wikipedia article. It's 1976. Some Americans at the Korean DMZ are cutting down a tree that obscures their vision to the North Korean side. A couple of North Koreans come out and kill a few Americans with their own axe. The Americans and South Koreans come back with such a massive show of force it's not even funny. Bombers, jet planes, 27 helicopters, a full aircraft carrier moved off the coast. Thousands of troops, troop carriers, commandos, all just to send in a squad of army engineers with chainsaws to cut down that goddamn tree. I would highly recommend giving the forces used part of the Wikipedia article a read. It's riveting and hilarious. Edit. Thanks for the silver, fellow appreciator of American awesomeness. Who knew my top comment would be about the most expensive tree cutting of all time? Genghis Khan to Shah al-Din. After the Khwarezmids plundered one of Genghis Khan's caravans, killed his people, and took his shit, he thought to take the diplomatic approach and send 2 envoys and an interpreter. Shah al-Din decided to be a dumbass about it. He shaved the heads of the envoys to shame them and sent them back with the head of the interpreter. Mr. Khan was kinda pissed, so he marched 200,000 of his boys and ducking annihilated their town with only 1 stroke. 4 of that number are even able to fight back. He was so pissed at the Shah that he had the rivers keeping the surrounding villages alive fully diverted, so that he would literally wipe al-Din's birthplace off the map and make it so that it was like he never existed. No one would settle there or live there ever again. No one would be there to remember his enemy who had disrespected him. Not even the dogs or cats would be spared, said Genghis Khan. You can still go see the ruins of the once great cities of the Khwarezmid Empire. They are huge and the wind blasts sand through the bleached bones of a civilization that Genghis Khan reduced to a wasteland for having disrespected him 1 time. Twice. Once for robbing his caravan and once for the diplomats. They didn't play baseball back then, so the 3-strike rule didn't apply. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. Thanks for watching, mate. Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more high quality content.